by Nicole. I'm Professor Jennifer Adams. I'm here in the Secondary Education and Earth and Environmental Sciences Department, for those of you that don't know me. And I work with Dr. Curtis Harris on a number of projects in Barbuda and here in, here in Brooklyn as well. And we're very happy to welcome some colleagues of another colleague of ours, Noel Hefley, in the back there, and he's also done some interdisciplinary work with us in Barbuda. So we're really excited to have our guest speakers here today, because they're really they'll tell you much about their work, but really getting you to look at and think about some interdisciplinary ways of approaching some of the things that that we've been talking about, that you've been talking about in class, and that that we all collectively talk about, because we all have common interests in both in environmental studies, aesthetics, many different things. So I'm just going to read their bios just so that you can have a little bit of background information about who they are. Tim Collins, who's sitting in front there, is a principal in the Collins and Goto studio in Glasgow. He is an artist, author, and planner. He has worked across art, science, philosophy, developing artwork, public artwork, and research related to nature and public space for over 20 years. He has worked within a wide range of communities, developing methods and practices that take the best advantage of arts and aesthetics in the public interest. Over the past decades, working with his partner, Reiko Goto, Tim has been developing sculpture and performative artwork, tools, technologies that attend to the physiological interface between people, the atmosphere, and forests and trees. They've also begun a new body of work focused upon the relationship between the internal ecology of the human body and the chemical material conditions of the outside world. Tim served as an associate professor and principal investigator at the Carnegie Mellon Institute, and that's in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, as a professor of art, ecology, and planning, associate dean in research and development at the University of Wolverhampton, to the physiological response of trees to the change in atmospheric photosynthesis. Reiko continues this line of work, considering other life forms and ecological communities. So we're very lucky and honored to welcome these guests to us, and you can tell from their bios that it's a very, very interdisciplinary approach to science, art, philosophy, all those different things. So I hope that this will allow you to think differently about some of the things that you're thinking about in class right now. Let's give them an applause.
First, we want to thank Jennifer, Sophia, and Noel for having us here in the first place. And we want to thank you all for taking time out of your day to listen to us. Jennifer, we have, 30 minutes to talk?
How much time do we have? The class ends at 12:15. Yeah, just like a little bit before that. So, maybe 35, 40 minutes, and then Q&A.
So I'll just get started. So what we're going to talk about is spirit in the air, seeing the unseen. We're interested in both ethics and aesthetics. We're interested in technology that allows us to see, hear, and feel things that are going on around us in the natural world. We're both trained as visual artists. We each have 3 degrees in our field, and we work from a research position. Normally, we do a lot of different things, but normally we spend years working on projects. So much of what we do involves what we call situated theory and practice. So we're interested in theories, but we're interested in how theory and new ideas can bring effect in specific places. We've moved away from what we would call an emancipative approach to art practice, which is basically nothing more than thinking about nature in the context of a post-industrial urban setting. So I grew up in West Warwick, Rhode Island, an old textile mill community, and we've worked extensively in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Both places struggle with an aesthetic renewal that's driven by nature, yet everything in the human regulation, and policy area of that nature. So when we were working in Pittsburgh, we began to realize that there was incredible opportunity to ally ourselves with nature and help to free nature from on it. So zoning laws, attitudes, ways of understanding that just constrained what was going on. So we're going to start with a short video from recent work in the Highlands of Scotland. So this is a new shift. Over the last, we've lived in the UK for 8 years. Over the last 8 years, we've worked specifically with individual trees. Reiko will talk about that at length, talking about empathy in relationship to technology in our practice. But we're going to begin with a short video from recent work in the Highland community of Rannoch. And Rannoch is an interesting place. It's the site of the Blackwood of Rannoch, which is one of the largest Caledonian pine forests in Scotland. It's the one that's closest to the major cities of Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Dundee. So I'll just do a few minutes from a video from work we're doing there. And then Reiko will talk about the evolution of ideas about empathy and technology and the work that she did while she was doing her PhD at Robert Gordon University, which is up in Aberdeen, which is in the northeast of Scotland. If we've got time, we'll touch on a commission that we did for the City of Edinburgh Arts Festival called CO2 Edinburgh. So basically, here we are in the Black with a community. You can see it's an aging community. This is a very difficult place to get to. There's only one road in and out of it. It's 3 hours north of Glasgow. It plays an important role as one of the largest, most intact Caledonian forests of Scotland. So what does that mean? So the Caledonian pinewood would have been the native forest of Scotland. There's something like 82 sites, but some of those sites are a little bigger than this room. Yeah? They're scattered all over Scotland. The Blackwood is over 100 hectares in size, which is significant. It's one of only 1,000 hectares in size. It's only one of 6 that are greater than 1,000 hectares in Scotland. It's a curious forest. It's a very aesthetically rich forest. It's a biodiverse forest. It's also a place, particularly the forest in Rannoch, is important because it's been the site of 300 years of conflict. So this goes back to the time of before our American Revolution, 1600s, 1700s. There was the Jacobite Revolution. The British beat the Scots. Many of the people in Rannoch would have been revolutionaries. The British established barracks in Rannoch to basically settle everybody down. They then, all the lands in Rannoch were forfeit to the king, so they were taken away from the people that owned them. The Blackwood would have been taken away 3 times, once in, let me think, 1682, once in 1715, once in 1745. Now this would have disrupted the human-nature relationship in that place. And of course, if you go to the 19th century, you have what they call the Scottish clearances, where there would have been 1,800 people living in Rannoch. And within 6 years, they were down to 900 people. People were just forced off the land so that the landlords could farm sheep. It's a really complicated place, and what's interesting is the forest has embodied some of these conflicts. So the aesthetic condition of the forest is in some way, shape, or form tied to the land use practices that have occurred over 300 years. So as we're trying to figure out, what are we going to do with this as artists? Reiko and I sit down and we just start to write it out and try to think it through. So we came up with these ideas for a forest art practice. And the first question was, can we contribute to the potential for a tree or forest community to prosper in an age of environmental change? The second question is, can we reveal empathic interrelationship between people and trees in urban and rural settings? With so few trees in the rural setting, it's really important that people in cities appreciate what's out there and begin to understand what it means to them. The other question is, can we embody ideas or experiences that affect or reshape perception and normative value. So one of the things we've become really clear about through our art practice is that we have a lot of normative values, things that we just know. Yeah, we're just clear about them. But with new ideas can shape perception. Perception can then shape experience. And once you renew your experience, there's potential to reconsider your values. And that's something that we think is really important. These are granny trees. So these are some of the 300-year-old trees that occur in the Blackwood. Now what's interesting about them is just the way they're so spread out, which is an unusual form for this particular species of tree. The reason it's spread out is because there's a history of conflicted land use. So there would have been goats, sheep, deer underneath this forest. So the understory, the new growth, trees would have been cut away, allowing the trees to spread out like this. So aesthetically, it's a really rich environment. Now one of the curious things is it's one of the most biodiverse forests because of this condition. Now this is a more typical Caledonian pine setting with closely spaced trees. But because of this historic condition, the understory is incredibly rich. There's, I don't remember, there's like 900 different species in this place. So aesthetically, when you go into this forest, Reiko and I always laugh. We always say that the place looks back at you. Yeah? Every time we go in, there's something new going on. There's new moths that are coming out. There are new insects that are coming out. There are new plants that are starting to go into bud. There's new berries. There's blackberries. There's cowberries. There's blaeberries. It's a really interesting place. Very rich. So I'm just going to play a little bit. This is a video that we did for the Perthshire Museum and Art Gallery. It might make you a little dizzy.
Thinking with the Blackwood. We want to talk about the Blackwood of Rannoch, a forest rated for its old trees and exemplary biodiversity that is also an iconic cultural ecosystem, a living thing that shapes culture as surely as culture shapes it. We want to consider the historic moment when the Blackwood was saved by science and the need for renewed public interest as a result of the ongoing success. Finally, we will touch on the ideas that the forests are on the move and what that might mean for people in Rannoch, Perthshire, and Scotland.
I'm just going to stop it there. You're seeing also the Gaelic language, which is the native language of Scotland. Coia Vor is basically a forest. And what's interesting is the language was dominant right through the 1890s. There still would have been 90% of the population speaking Gaelic as well as English. With the coming of the 20th century, by 1920, 1930, is basically down to 60% speaking Gaelic. By 1970, there's something like 4% speaking Gaelic. And today, there's only 3 people in the entire valley that can speak Gaelic. Gaelic is starting to come back in Scotland. Scotland has just had its first independence referendum in 300 years. It failed, but there's a lot of interest in the future of Scotland. So it's a really interesting place to be. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Reiko.
Thank you. Probably you can't imagine, one day, when you go to school, your teacher said you cannot speak English anymore. That kind of situation. Probably you cannot imagine, but that's happened that place. My practice is environmental art that is based on empathic relationship with living things and environment. I'm going to talk about how I got there. Tim and I was a research fellow at Carnegie Mellon University for 8 years. We accomplished 2 projects, the 9 Mile Run Greenway project and then 3 Rivers Second Nature. And at the time, we met with No, and he helped us for 5 years. Both projects dealt with recovery of ecosystem and then community dialogues in post-industrial places in Western Pennsylvania. We moved to the UK in 2005, and my new inquiry began with a set of questions. Is it possible to create a change if we understand life is interdependent and interrelated with nature in our environment? The meta question is how we understand the other. Tim said the freedom of nature. And one thing I understand is if, like human perspective, people don't understand each other, and then I am frustrated when I am not really understood. So it's important the other person, the other side understand you. Then you become free. That kind of logic. Anyway, okay. The word ecology, oikos, house of living things, is translated in Japanese as seitaiga. Sei means living, tai means state, and gaku means study of. The middle word, tai, state, consists of 2 characters. No, the upper part, and then kokoro, the bottom part. No means ability, intellectual abilities. Kokoro means heart. I interpret this empathy. I also interpret no, sympathy. In my own interpretation of ecology, the challenge is to experience and understand the state of living things with sympathy and empathy. Empathy is the human ability to understand the other. Edith Stein, a phenomenologist, said, we not only see such vigor and sluggishness in people and animals, but also in plants. Empathy fulfillment is also possible here. Tim and I chose tree as a subject matter. Why trees? In 2000, we visited the Duke University Forest Research Facility in North Carolina. The scientists invited us to climb a 40-foot high structure that was built around and then among pine trees. He showed us portable equipment that would measure the amount of photosynthesis from the tree leaves. He grabbed a bunch of pine tree and then placed the needle leaves between 2 plexiglass called a leaf chamber that was connected to the measuring device. When the sun emerged from the cloud, the photosynthesis rate went up. The scientist asked me to put my hand on the leaves to block the sunlight. The meter went down immediately. We were astonished to see the response of the tree. After this experience, we became interested in an artwork that would create similar experience. In 2008, we started working with the plant physiologist, a musicologist, and a computer programmer to develop an experiential sculpture that let us bridge the gap between nature and culture. Plein air, an interactive sculpture consists of a leaf chamber connected to high-quality sensor technology embedded in a traditional painting easel with a laptop computer processing equation that measure and then sonify photosynthesis and then respiration. with this artwork, we sought to elucidate empathic relationships between trees and humans by revealing reactions to environmental conditions like temperature, humidity, and then atmospheric carbon dioxide that are shared. And this experiment was done in Headland, California. You see that. It comes back. That's the trees doing it, comes back. Takes 2 seconds. Going back to the normal pace. Okay. All right. The early stage of the development, we spent time to analyze the data through sound exploration. For example, this is the sound of the post live oak in the morning. Yeah. The next sound example is the same oak, but noontime. The sun is shining and photosynthesis is very active. Okay. The third sample is the same oak in the afternoon. The sun is still up, but the tree seems to be slowing down, almost like sleeping. What I understood in this study was changes in the tree. In the morning, it is slowly raising the activity, and in the midday, if the sun is up, the tree is very active. In the afternoon, the tree rests. Plain air was shown in various places in Scotland. Peacock Visual Arts in Aberdeen, Woodenburn, Banchory, Aberdeenshire, Nottingham, Trent University, the Tent Gallery in Art Space, and then Nature, Edinburgh College of Art. Oh, no sound? This sound composition was developed with Chris Malcolm. It's not working. Okay, sorry. All right. During the presentation at the Institute of Advanced Study in the Humanities, the University of Edinburgh, plain air was set up with a small oak tree next to a large window in the small room. The windows and the door were closed. packed with 16 people, the carbon dioxide levels went up quickly. It was a crowd gray day without enough lights to drive photosynthesis. The real-time sound system was making a slowly rising but monotonous and repetitive sound like this, boom, 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 boom. Preparing to present a video, I put the curtain on the window. Soon, but not abruptly, the sound from the system was reduced and then it became very quiet. After the video ended, I opened the curtain again. The tree woke up and then sound started again. Some people in the audience were struck by the significance of this incident. Others remained unaware of it. Plain air is not a technological intervention, but an extension of our physical senses, a system designed to enable experimental empathic experience. The walk embedded both tree and the environment, taking stock of physiological reactions by monitoring individual leaves. The system sees what cannot be seen and to hear what cannot be heard. The empathic experience with the tree is subtle, but it is always there and enables our imagination with trees in different environments, such as living room, a garden, or forest.
So we've still got a few minutes, so I'll talk about CO2 Edinburgh. This was 2013. We were asked by Creative Carbon Scotland if we could take some of the work we had been doing with trees and try to find a way to reveal carbon dioxide in the city of Edinburgh. Edinburgh, just so you have some sense of it, is a lovely old city on a hill. There's a castle at the top of it. There's lots going on in Edinburgh. It's packed in the summertime with tourists, and they have one of the best art festivals in Europe. So this was the context that we were asked to work with. We were given 6 weeks and £5,000 to pull something together that, in discussion, the problem that we were trying to solve was, what the hell does 400 parts per million mean? Yeah, because we hear that constantly in the news, you know, as the new point that's recently been breached with carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. But we really have no way of understanding what that means. So we started to play various games with scientists and computer programmers, performers. There's a whole range of people we worked with. And here you're starting to see spirit in the air. One of the things we did is we basically took some of the monitors we were using with the trees and plugged them into portable systems with an LED readout. So people would be walking. We basically had these, what were they called, Reiko? I can't remember the young people. We hired young people to run around Edinburgh with these sensors. And it was interesting, you know, as a bus goes by, you get a spike of CO2. If you are in a city street, there's one really interesting plaza right off Queen Street in Edinburgh, and it drops down about 10 steps, and there's a little coffee shop there. If you took the sensor down there, the CO2 would go up by 15 parts per million, yeah? And so you would get a completely different readout. If you were up on Queen Street and then you were in the Queen's Park area, you would get a reduction of 10 parts per million. The other thing we did is we mounted CO2 monitors in a variety of arts and performing arts venues. Now what's interesting is, depending on the systems that are in place in a building, the air will be renewed or not renewed regularly. Yes? So some of the older buildings at the University of Edinburgh, where students think it's the staff members that are putting, the professors that are putting them to sleep, what's actually happening is there's so much CO2 in the room, once it gets over 1,200 parts per million, you fall asleep really easily. Yeah? So we have a little tiny art studio, and if we have 5 people in the room, we can be up around 900 parts per million within an hour of talking together. Yeah? So we would set this up in various places. I'm trying to remember the Bedlam Theater is the student performance space. And we've got really great data from there because basically we ran 24-hour tests, and in the morning the CO2 would be around 350, 380 parts per million. These are not really perfect sensors, but they're good sensors. But once the crowds would start to come in from the performances, in a matter of 15, 20 minutes, the CO2 levels in the Bedlam Theater would go up around 1,000, 1,200, 1,500. I think we had some readings that were up around 1,845, which is really significant because that only, so there's a, CO2 doesn't really, isn't known to really be a huge health risk, but it is proven to be something that will put us to sleep, that will dull our senses, and when we're up around 1,700 parts per million, building safety officers start to kick in. So it's interesting, we had a number of buildings that had those kind of conditions. So we're running around Glasgow with the equipment. Here's Reiko out in front of the Fruit Market Gallery, which is a really great contemporary art space. Everybody had uniforms. We tried to make it look as official as possible because people kept chasing us out of, like we go into a parking garage, and somebody would come up and say, do you have permission to be here? And we'd say, well, of course, we're scientists working with the Edinburgh Art Festival. They wouldn't quite know what to make of it. Along with this, everything that we do, what we're interested in is creating a public discourse. Yeah, we're interested in changing places. We're interested in putting new information, what we call strategic knowledge, in place that challenges what people think they know about something. Yeah. So one of the ways we do that, as surely as we're doing the exhibition, we've got everything going on. We work with a cultural producer in Scotland named Chris Fremantle. And Chris helped us organize regular talks. So we had talks with artists. We had people like Ross Perel and Douglas. We had philosophers. This is a technology artist. I can't remember his name, Chris. He's just got a professorship. Philosopher Wallace Heim. And so basically, different groups of people. We had artists, philosophers. We also had musicians, poets, and performance artists in to talk about how we get at these kind of sticky questions, what it means to live in the 21st century, how do we contribute through culture to questions of climate change, environmental change, and ultimately to our own long-term health and well-being. Does the artist have a role in this? Not everybody agreed that we did. Yeah? There were also scientists that would come in. So we would have these great rolling discussions, 20, 30 people in the room, most of us interacting, most of us arguing. it was actually a great time. And a lot of it is videotaped. So that's part of what we do when we do work. So that's 30 minutes. Do you want me to stop, or I can do a few more minutes if you like?
We can do it one more.
Okay. So I've got 5 slides about previous work, and this is art, science, and technology to enable public discourse about the post-industrial public realm. So in other words, Pittsburgh is, was known as hell with the lid off. Yeah? So if you go along the Monongahela River, there was 18 steel mills, 3 coal-fired power plants, 2 coke works, the largest coke works in the United States. Coke is just a process where they make coal more useful. So we did a five-year project called the Three Rivers Second Nature, where we worked on the Monongahela, the Allegheny, and the Ohio River. And then we also worked on the 9 Mile Run Greenway project, which is just working on a small stream, which is embedded in a valley that's been created by dumping steel mill waste. And actually, we worked with Noel Heffley on most of these projects. This is where, yeah. So Three Rivers Second Nature is 5 years of interdisciplinary ecological analysis. So this was an odd project because it's artist-driven, but the Warhol Foundation and the Heinz Foundation gave us money to hire scientists. Yeah. So it's not often that artists get a chance to hire scientists. So we were able to work on questions of aquatic the conditions, the small